So this, one of the skills we need to develop is the ability to put ourselves under pressure. This is something that John was very good at. So just feel, use your imagination to feel that pressure from above pressing you down, and feel your legs sort of working against each other. So this leg is pushing, but this leg isn't wanting to let go. So there's almost like a squabble going on between your two legs. So the action of my legs isn't simply moving a body. It's actually making this area sort of change shape all the time. Because this area here needs to be very sort of malleable in order for energy to pass through it. So remember, we're using the legs as suppliers of energy rather than as a means of motion. Or you can think of energy as being internal movement. So obviously we're moving the body, but a lot of the effort that's going into the legs is trying to get movement within the body. Yeah? And that requires spirit. So it requires a bit of a fight, a bit of a tussle going on within your own being. So you can think of it in terms of sort of getting tone into the body, getting the right sort of tension into the body. So let's just keep going with this and just get into different visualizations. So now the loop. So this circuit that's going down the back of the leg, up the front, down the back of the leg. So the back and the outside, front and the inside. So out of the circuit, really up. So here, out, up. Yeah. So we need this feeling that this here, the gravity of my own down chair, is what's holding me together. So in my mind, I need to be able to reach to my peripheries. Yeah. It's easy to reach my head. I'm already in my hands. So it's getting down into the foot. So it's almost like you're swallowing your own leg. So we're sort of working on body as one unit at the moment. Just trying to get the whole thing unified from here. And now let's just think of figures of eights. So now we've got the legs included. So we want this line to sort of be stretchy. So there's like if you put a piece of elastic, it's always pulling back. You want the feeling that here you're stretching a piece of elastic that's always pulling back. Okay. I just feel this. So it's sort of pulling into itself. And that is helping the lower back to sort of flatten out, round out, if anything. Okay, so now let's just look at this. back to here. Yeah, so just feel it's only really once you've established this that you're able to really sort of release into riding horse and get this feeling that you are actually on a horse. So the knees are going out and the ankles are coming in. Okay, and now let's just work, just getting the pelvis to rock. So we get the tail to sort of rock back by just releasing here. Yeah. So we're trying not to move the body as little as possible and just get the pelvis sort of rolling on this pivot. Yeah. So that my tail sticks back a little bit, and then I relax the sacroiliacs and it rolls under, like my tail comes under. And then here, so just use your own hands. So just pressing into this sort of tender point in the fold of your groin, and then just rolling the hands around to the back, either side of the sacrum, and just stroke down your buttock to just help your buttock feel like it's drooping into the back of the leg. And that will just bring the tail under a little bit, and then back around to the front. Release here, and 1. Release, and then yeah, so what happens when we release here is that we lose a little bit of that body as one unity, and that enables us to step out of ourselves, to actually move relative to the room. Yeah. So as I break here and my tail is allowed to go back a little bit behind me, then this also breaks forwards. So there's this desire, if you like, it's woken up a desire to actually step forwards. And then when I stroke here, it brings me back to that still centered unity that doesn't really want to move. And then as soon as I break here, we just want to feel that sort of lift of eagerness, of the possibility of adventure, if you like. Yeah. And then here, release. This brings me back into myself, into my Dan Chen. So as I stroke down here, the Dan Chen naturally sucks in a little bit, so it becomes like a refuge. Yeah? But then when I break here, something spills out of here, lifts and comes out. And then when I roll this down, that comes back into the Dan Chen. So there's this subtle, very subtle sort of energetic movement between the up and the out and the down and the in. So, yeah. Yeah, so all of our actions really are just sort of playing with this motor, this machine. Yeah, and the importance of using your hands on your body is it just makes it just more sort of physical, less in the mind. Yeah. So we just have to start feeling the mind less as a place of thinking. So it's not like a little man in the head that's nattering away. The mind is really like a sort of a space of energy. It's much more like the body, really. So here I'm just softening here. And you can become almost like a squirrel. You can always imagine your tail sort of almost reaching up behind you. So you've got that bright and breezy, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed eagerness, And then as you sweep down here, that's basically doing the same as pulling the belly in. It's just coming from a different place. And then just prod a little bit. So remember this, as we break here, there should be a sinking, a release. Something is broken, something has let go. And that has enabled me to drop a little bit. And then when I release here, something is also released and let go, but now it's behind me. So there's this sense almost like I'm falling backwards and just slipping right down into my legs. And then here, there's a sense of sort of falling forwards, becoming more like an animal. And then this is more like just almost reclining and going to sleep. But both of them are actually making me sink. Good. Okay, now let's just continue with it, but just try and get a bit of turning. Yeah, so let one finger sort of prod a little bit more, and then the other one come in. Yeah, so we're always having to guard against the reluctance to turn. That's the one thing I should be extremely willing to do, is turn. So just think of yourself as very much two halves, a left and a right, and they're always playing, they're always dancing together, if you like. And so you are the dance between your left and right sides. Without that dance, there's basically no energy, because the energy of the left and the right sides will tend to cancel out if you just keep them regular. So here it's like I just slip here, and then this side. Okay, now let's just get it rocking a little bit. that remembers. So it's not just a mechanical thing like this. Yeah? It's, again, it comes from relaxation. So I want my pelvis to sort of just rock a little bit like this. It can be minute. Yeah? Imagine if you're, if I've got my hand in here and this just rocks very slightly. This can just be like less than a millimeter, but it will translate into quite a significant movement of my hand because it's a long way from the pivot. So that's the feeling I want, is that there's been a tiny movement here. And the movement has happened not because I have done this, yeah, but because this leg has just released a little bit and allowed this hip to drop down preferentially. And then this will just naturally push up to take up the slack, if you like. And then here I just release here. And that allows this hip to drop down into the leg. And this one will just rise up naturally. And it's like the rule that I'm obeying is that this isn't allowed to move, the down chair, but it's allowed to, movement is allowed around it. So I just soften here, and this drops down, and this naturally just pushes up into the hip, and then I just soften here, and ooh. Yeah. So all the time, just looking to get the movement that we're trying to produce coming from a relaxation rather than a willful tension. So I release here, and what happens? It's almost like I'm not quite sure what's going to happen when I release. So there's always this sense that what the movements that you produce have a freshness to them because they take you by surprise as much as anyone. So I just release here. And then these movements become feeling. They're not just, it's not just physical, it's getting into here, getting into energy. So just soften here and just let this down. And it's quite difficult, because it's like, what needs to happen to actually release? It's not as easy as it sounds to let go of something that we've been holding on to our whole life. And that's the task at hand, but it's also really difficult. So here, ooh. Yeah, so we want to work in such a way that our blockages are being exposed, are coming to the surface. And that's always really difficult because it feels like you're going backwards or that you're getting worse. John told me about the second time he went to see Leon. This must have been 1972. And Leon met him at the airport and said to him, "How's it going? How's the practice?" And John just said, "Oh, it's terrible. I just feel like I'm going backward." And Leon just said, "Oh, good, sign of progress." Yeah. So it's when it's all beginning to sort of just feel like it's falling apart. That's just an indication that you're getting into tender, difficult spots in your practice, and it's actually beginning to do something. So here, release. And then how do you come up? So here. So if it doesn't make you cry, then you're not doing it right. And so for me, it's very much like, I don't know if you, I remember when I was a kid and I used to be really looking down my microscope. And the highlight of my life up to that point, shows how sad I was finding an amoeba. And I was so excited, I just ran all the way around to my friend's house, which was like a mile and a half away, just to tell them to come. But they're amazing because it's like they just sort of break open and their liquidness flows out of them and then forms across. So that's the feeling here. So here, it breaks, a hole breaks, and something flows out down my leg. And it becomes my leg, if you like. So it's totally non-mechanical. It's fluid movement. Yeah? Ooh. Yeah, it's like the buttocks are sort of dripping down your leg, like they're made out of wax and they're just melting. Okay. And now, yeah. And now let's just tighten it up again. Now, the problem with making it liquid, it does tend to run away with itself. And so you tend to find yourself getting too relaxed. Feel that very centered inner tension, just drawing everything in. And we just have to just pluck up the courage to really look at that point here. And it's just, you know, when you do look at it, when you look at yourself looking at it, you realize that we do all we can not to. You know, so we tense up an area so that we don't actually have to look at the point. You know? So here I'm just trying to find that point and just draw it in. And if I really found the point, then there'd be no movement. You know, it'd just be this tiny point that's just drawing into itself. You know, so that ability just to be still and settled in one place, it's really difficult. Okay. And now let's just try breaking preferentially here on one side, so here, but not here. Yeah, so when I break here, then I turn. Yeah, so this is what produces a turn, is that you break in the groin on one side of the body. So this is the place in Tai Chi where we would yield from. Yeah? So you can either think of this point or this point, but actually this is better. So when you yield, when you turn away to the young side, then you're folding here. So let's try that. So I just break here. And it just allows me to just pivot around my spine. And then just come back. And now just break here. Cool. And again, what that feeling of something dropping, of a release. So my yielding has been effectuated by a release. I've accepted what's happening to me. And something in me has just relaxed. And my movement has flowed out of there. So here, ooh. You know, what we have to be careful of is that we don't. So again, just try not to move the down chin too much. So when you do release here and something flows down this leg, which is the relaxing leg, then it tends to pull me towards it. Now that's what we want. So what we don't want is this sort of yielding where you do this, where you're getting out of the way. So that's okay. It will get you out of the way, but you won't be able to follow up because you'll have no power from the tap. So this is yielding, coiling the person in, binding them up, getting into the leg so that you can use the opposite hand. So I yield. So I yield. So this point here, relative to the person, is moving away from them and drawing them in. But this side is moving around. So just feel that line from your foot here, up the leg, across the back, up the spine, and across into the other shoulder. So it's basically, you're just made a circle. If you imagine my foot, if I could touch it here, this would be a circle. So as I turn and yield, the opposite arm becomes filled with the energy from the leg that I'm relaxing into. And then release here. And so feel the release, the softening, relaxation down, and feel this line naturally just flowing up the body and into the opposite hand. Yeah, so this is just the recoil to gravity, if you like. Yeah, so as I soften here and sink, something in the leg is having to get tense to stop me from falling down into it. And that tension is just slowly coming up the body and will express in the opposite hand. And it's very natural. It's nothing special. So here you are, I'm going down. As I'm releasing down, there's a flow of strength up the body into the opposite hand. And just feel how it sort of naturally just sort of pulls you forwards. It's almost like you want to lean into it, like in traditional yoga style. So just allow that. So just let it express itself how it wants to. Wow. So again, I just want to feel this coil around my body. Yeah, this is the power of front foot energy. It spirals. It comes up the body in a coil that's going like this, that's spiraling upwards. So back foot energy tends to be more like a sort of straight line that's just coming up. So the power of front foot energy is its spiral. It's much more sort of cutting and damaging, but also it's much more difficult to employ. And it will always work best if you've actually yielded and your front foot energy is a consequence of your yield, rather than it being something that you've decided to produce for effect. And it will just naturally bring the other side in. But remember, you tend to yield into the same foot. So with this hand into this foot, and you attack from the opposite foot. So I'm yielding into this foot, and I'm attacking with the other hand from it as well. And so at this point here, there's a flow down of my yielding relaxation from this break here, and there's a flow up from the strength just coming up the leg from the ground, which again is a consequence of my sinking. If I can keep that sinking going like a flow, then what comes up will also be a flow. And then here I just release, and this just comes round. And you want that ability to just hold it, and it's still flowing. There's still a release here. There's still this coming up. So you're feeling the flows. It's not just a position. It's not just a posture. It's much more like an energy machine. It's something that produces energy. Okay. Okay, so now let's so again, just breaking here to turn, and then just bring your hand round to the back and just soften here to bring yourself round. Break here to turn, and then just feel, it's like there's like the feeling is that you're leaning back into like a sheet of rubbery elastic all the time. So there's like a buoyancy forwards. So here's I release here, I'm being pushed back here, but there's like I'm sinking into a skin of rubber that's beginning to flow me back, but it's from the release on the just above the buttock here. So this is releasing here, and then this releases here. So I'm yielding to something that's coming in from the front. And then there's something about my own energy that's sort of supporting me and propping me up from behind, that's wanting to thrust me forwards all the time. And that's what we're feeling from the sacroiliac, if you like. So here something is. So you can see with the turning, one release here turns me away from the front, and then a release from behind here will bring me back to the front. And then here release, here release, release. So something here. And then it's like something is coming out the back here, but it's wanting to come round. It's wanting to return me. So here and round here. now just here. So now the down chin is very much like the center point, and the two sides of your body have almost fallen away from each other. Because we've been working one side and then the other. Okay. And now let's just do like the first warm-up exercise, but with this feeling of this releasing, this releasing, this releasing, this releasing. So it's very much not one thing that's happening. It's loads of things. You're having to sort of manage this complex situation, and it gives this sort of illusion of sort of smoothness and like one thing happening. But there's lots of different places where your mind needs to be. So I'm releasing here, but also something is coming out here. Yeah? So actually, if it gets difficult, then just look at one foot. And so I'm looking at this foot. So this foot is connected to this hand. So as I turn here, there's a line of energy coming up from this foot through the body. But then as I turn here, this line, instead of coming around my back, it comes around my front and down this arm here. Yeah? So, you've got to somehow take it to pieces. So what we're trying to do really is just switch from ego to spirit. Yeah, so instead of like the ego being like the fat controller, instead of it all coming from this sort of remote controlling control room, which is my head, it's much more coming from my spirit firing muscles and living sort of down here or here, wherever you want to see it. Yeah, so to start with, it feels terribly complicated. We're trying to do something that's almost impossible. But then there should come a point where suddenly it sort of clicks and it's just all doing itself almost. And that's just a sign that your spirit has kicked in. There's a lovely thing that Wittgenstein said. He said, imagine you're in a room with one door and it appears locked because you try the door and it won't open. But actually the door opens inward rather than outward, and all you've tried to do is push, you haven't tried to pull. So it's like there comes a point when you're working where you try to pull and suddenly it opens up and there's this explosion. And it's just gone into a completely different realm. And so it's like our struggles are sort of, in a sense, holding us back. So something has to sort of reverse. It has to be like a reversal of something. But of course, without the struggle, it's unlikely you get to that point of actually making the reversal. So, yeah, and that's like a principle. So it's actually there all the time. So it's like there's always, like I always say, there's always a miracle wanting and waiting to happen that will actually take you into a completely different realm. So what the ego is trying to do all the time is to protect you from that, is to pull back from that grace. And what the spirit is doing all the time is just, wanting to encounter that grace. That's great. Okay, let's just get back to here. So, okay, and now let's just using the legs now to actually sort of push forwards and back. So I'm going to push. I want to feel, so it's very similar to just sort of moving from leg to leg by pushing with the leg. Yeah. So let's just try this a while. So just move, I push the ground, and there's a recoil, which is me moving in the opposite direction. And so whenever we do anything in Tai Chi, we want it to be a secondary action, if you like. So my primary action is my leg pushing, trying to push my foot into the ground. So I'm trying to inject into the ground. And what that does, it produces a flow of energy up, which takes me across. Yeah, so if you can get energy to do the moving, then it will just be stopped. So I'm pressing into the ground and I let myself flow. So that pressure has to be stopped. And like you're pushing onto a sort of rubbery skin. because I don't want it to be the pressure that actually moves me across. I want it to be the energy that's produced by the pressure. So I push the ground, I'm relaxing and flowing down. And then there comes a point just before the force is actually moving my body. So just before that point, something will flow up through me and I can let that take me. So here, whoa, whoa. Now this is why we need to be really quite sort of precise. So this ability to be quite accurate and like a precision instrument, because we're just trying to find that point. It's a really narrow window where there's the possibility of energy. And so I'm just applying pressure, and just before my body starts moving from it, there'll be this flow through me. So one, and you'll feel it here. Yeah? It is very much like a feeling, like an emotion. Yeah? So it's like something has flown up through me. It's flowed up, flown up. Think that, the word emotion, it just means to stir. Yeah? Emotio. So it's like something is stirred and is coming up like a silt almost that's just swirling up from my leg and into my heart and is actually drawing me across. Yeah, so there's that point where I'm wanting to stay in this leg because I know that I need to. That's the rule, if you like. I need to stay in this leg. But then something has come up and there's a point where I just have to go with it. Yeah, it's like I think of it as like a salmon swimming against the flow. So it's like I'm flowing down here, and then this fish, this amazing fish, flows up against the flow. The salmon of wisdom. John used to love the image of the fish, the wriggling fish. Yeah, so my flow is downward, and something is slipping and sliding up through that, and it comes into here. And it can pop out and go up into the head, I can send it into the arms, whatever. Okay. And now just that same sort of action, but just using it to send this back. Yeah. So we've been turning by visualizing like a yield or break here. Yeah. So breaking here, and what that does, it just means that all the joints of the leg fold a little bit. So effectively my leg shrinks, and that will actually start me pulling down and moving in this direction. So now we just want to feel it coming more from the energy within my own body, more like this energy that we've just been working with. So what I want to do is like I'm trying to push my foot forwards on the ground. So I'm injecting, instead of injecting down like this to move that way, I'm now going to inject forwards to get the hip to move back. Yeah. And then pushing forwards with the foot here. Yeah. So what's difficult about this is it's difficult to keep it in the foot because it's wanting to slip up, especially into the hand. So as soon as we start yielding like this, it tends to come much more into the arms and less in the foot. So I'm pushing my foot forwards and I'm actually slipping backwards. Yeah. And then I'm pushing this foot forwards and it's actually slipping me backwards. So I just want to feel that point equivalent to what we've just been doing, where I'm going in both directions. So I'm actually flowing in this direction, but it's actually bringing up energy, which is sending my hip backwards. Yeah? So I'm pressing with the foot down, and that's making me flow back. Yeah, so we did this last week, and probably the week before as well. But now we're just trying to get it coming much more from the foot. You know, we were doing the arms, I think, last week. Yeah. So now just feel that foot pressing and causing this flow backwards here. But keep the mind in the foot. Keep the mind in the flow forwards. And just allow the backward movement of your hip to just flow out of that like a secondary effect. So I'm releasing forwards, and this hip is going back. I'm releasing forwards. So we're just looking at the reaction to an action. So again, it's just Newton's third law of motion, really. I'm just pushing in one direction to get a movement in the other direction. But what we're trying to do is to keep the mind with the first direction and almost ignore what's happening. Because if I let my mind switch too much to the movement, it's all happening there then. It loses its source and it just gets hard and manipulative. So here I'm flowing forwards and the hip flows back. And so I have to watch the effect without wanting to control it, which is quite difficult. I'm pushing forwards with the foot, and that is causing this movement here. I'm pushing forwards with the foot, and it makes my hip move back. Yeah? And so it's got this sort of action, like sort of like a cat, you know, when it's all squeezing. And so something is going on here in my feet and my hands, but it's producing an opposite reaction here. Yes, it's actually this is the sort of thing that just takes a lot of practice. Because we're clever. So if we know what effect we should be getting, it's very easy to produce that effect, but it's coming from the wrong place. So I just want to be really sort of honest with myself and just get the feet just pressing the ground, like my feet are sort of pressing into these rubbery skins. And then just standing, but just feeling like that is going on. It's almost subliminal, so very sort of delicate. So we're using the feet and the legs all the time. We're sort of playing in this sort of fluid way in order to get this constant stream of energy coming up the body. So very different from the way people normally use their legs, which is basically to freeze out all that activity. So as soon as I feel any part of my body beginning to set, like jelly beginning to set, I just bring in some fluidity to keep it poised at that delicate edge. And so that, in the Tao Te Ching, where it says, soft like ice about to melt. So it's like this solid that's just about to slip into a new phase, into a liquid phase. So it's hovering right at that edge. And for ice to actually melt, so like ice at 0 degrees and water at 0 degrees, the water has a lot more energy. So in order to melt, in order to become soft, you need energy. You need an input of energy. There's my feet, so you can see how this movement here. And so the play of my feet on the ground is just producing the turns and producing this, and it's even producing the pump of the dantian, the feet contracting in and out. It's a bit, I always think of like a horse, because my daughter loves horses, and so I'm always reading horse stories to her. They're just amazing creatures. It's like they're just so ready to go all the time. Yeah? And then they've got this, it's very different from the energy we try to produce. Their energy is much more sort of a nervous movement. But they're totally bristling with aliveness, with spirit, unless they're depressed. It's quite interesting for my daughter's bat mitzvah. She wanted to take all her friends horse riding on the beach. So we found this place, this stable. And it was really distressing because they keep the horses docile by starving them. Yeah? So if you keep a horse underfed, then it gets depressed, and it will just do exactly what you want of it. Yeah? So I've got this picture of her with her like 13 friends, and they're all on horses, and the horses are all like this. Yeah? And you'd never get that picture. If the horses were healthy, they'd be active. So it's what humans do to nature is pretty disgusting, really. So this feeling that so it's like you're itching to go. You're raring to go. On the prowl, yeah? A predator. Okay, and then just bring it back. Now just bring it back, but even though so you're almost like a horse with blinkers on, yeah? So somehow something has failed, and you've come back to here, but this drop of a hat, you'd be off, yeah? You're primed. Okay, and now let's just bring it back. Okay, great.